Alright, I wanted to address plugins, buying new plugins and just plugins in general, as far as buying new plugins and what you need. The first thing, I hope you watch that video on DAWs, and the first thing I'm going to say about plugins is buy the professional version of whatever DAW you've decided to use. The stock plugins in there are supposed to be professional grade plugins to get done what you need. Any other plugins you need might be real specific, that you have a specific need, like an ADSR plugin, something like that is an example. But basically, when you're talking about plugins, understand what your plugins do. Your basic processor plugins, things like compressors and gates and reverbs, and look at the stock plugins you got as professional grade plugins. Just because they're not on the newest thing that, and wow, look at this new plugin. They're professional grade plugins. So treat them as such and really study what they do and the simplicity and the complexity of what they're able to do. And really study those stock plugins so you really understand what you've got. A lot of times, if you've done the first step and really went through that choosing your DAW well, and you bought the professional grade version, you will find that that question of plugins will answer itself most of the time. Like I said, you may get specific needs for plugins that you might want to buy this other plugin or something, or whatever. But a lot of times that's a totally different thing, But because the main processors of what your plugins do and the main effects that are in your DAW, the professional grade version, are professional grade plugins. Use them as such and treat them as such and look at them as such. They are made for your DAW from people working with your DAW, and they hopefully are complementary to your DAW, that work well with your DAW and the layout of your DAW. And if you spend some time really researching them and understanding what they do and understanding what you need done in your mix, you may find that you will answer a lot of those questions so you don't get caught up in that I need a new plugin thing anyway. And really check that out because they're good plugins, and like I said, buying the professional grade version can answer a lot of those questions. And also on your stock instruments, stock synth and stock sampler, things like that, the stock sound sets, all those kind of things. You got a convolution reverb that's a professional grade convolution reverb. Buy some samples, buy some impulse responses, not spend a ton of money on some new convolution reverb that's got some cool new thing that you don't need, that ain't going to really do anything for you, that you better should very much address what you're going to use that plugin for. If you really need that new compressor because it does this other thing. A compressor is supposed to compress. You buy another plugin because it does some other cool thing. And if you really need it to do the same thing, that's great. But really look into that. And I hope that kind of how I kind of see that, because I get people talking about plugins all the time and they don't even know what they do and they just get lost in them. A prime example is a guy, there's a reverb from Voxengo that's free. It's called Old School Reverb, and it's got a whole bunch of cool knobs on it. But the reality is that I might use it for some specific applications as a go-to reverb now and then, and if I want something unique that, is not just normal reverb, or bodybuilding from a reverb or from a convolution to get a certain sound of a certain room with certain reflections. That might do something a little bit different, but I understand that it's going to do something different and the different things it's going to do. I just grab it and play and keep going, does that make sense? And really study what it does. Do you need it? You'll find that a lot of those plugins, you start really studying everything about them, that pretty soon you get tired of studying them unless it's really something specific that you would like to do that's going to make your music unique, or has a certain parameter that is very valuable to you, that you will very soon get tired of looking at them and you will go back to what just gets the job done. Does that make sense? And not waste a lot of time with them. Now, there are some very specific applications When I first got my DAW, I downloaded every dang free plugin there was. I loved it. I just messed around with them all day long. I was like, oh yeah, that's so cool. And and it's like, but do I use them? Well, I found that I have a whole library of these plugins that I don't use, and I've actually bought very few plugins, and some donationware plugins where you donate something to them, and that are some really good plugins. Like the Spectro here, that does some, it does some cleaning up of harmonic content when you have distortion. And another thing about the plugins that you probably, I hope you learned on the last video about DAWs, is that if you've got a good performance, a good capture that's in time, it solves most of your problems. Any extra plugins you're buying that, if you're having to fix stuff all the damn time, something's wrong anyway, that you need to go back a step in the process and fix the problem rather than trying to fix it with a new plugin or fix it in the DAW with your time stretcher, quantize everything, does that make sense? So, those things are things you need to really look at. Is the plugin the issue, or is it something else back further in the process that you need to address and not buy a new plugin? But like this plugin, I've gotten some tracks that had some harmonic distortion in them that the track was really good other than that, and I really needed to address that, or I couldn't get a hold of the guy to make him re-record it, or I couldn't re-record it, and I liked the capture that much and the performance that well that it was worth spending some time messing around a little bit and trying to get the harmonic distortion out of it. ADSR tools can be another thing. Some transient shapers. If you really know what that plugin does, you have a use for it. Can you just do it with your EQ, your stock EQ and your stock gate and your stock, your stock tools? Can you do it with the stock tools you have and not buy a new plugin? Things like A/B comparison tools can be really cool. If your studio isn't doing it well enough for you, and that's great. I've got this free one that I've got from Hoffa that for A/B comparison that I grabbed one time, and I use it. I like it, and and it didn't cost me nothing. And I'd say they've got some good plugins. I don't get a whole lot of plugins anymore. I mean, if I find one that does something really cool, some new harmonic enhancer that's like, man, it does a really good job, and it's specific about the odd and even harmonics, and I look on the spectrogram what it's doing to these instruments, and I know that that's a good tool, and I know exactly what it's doing, and I've got a specific application for it, and I'm going to use it for those applications. It's just not going to sit in there and grab dust. Does that make sense? And that's another thing is sound sculpting. You can get plugins for doing different types of sound sculpting, and understand that's why you're buying those plugins, to actually do sound sculpting and what that plugin's doing to help you sculpt sound or sculpt instruments or sculpt sounds in your mix, and really understand everything about what that plugin is before you buy it or spend a bunch of time messing with it. And but there are a lot of cool tools out there. And basically, it's like I said that, you get a professional grade version and really understand the stock plugins, and then you start looking for plugins that are very specific. Now, there has been some times I've got a compressor that I use that was a free compressor that I seen one time, and I thought, wow, it looks like, the GUI it looked really nice. And I thought, well, they spent that much time on the GUI, I'll take a look at it, just because it did look really nice. And it was free, and I grabbed it, and I was like, and I used it, and it was like, I'll throw it on a track every now and then, because it's got two huge knobs that you couldn't miss if you wanted to, and it's like, and it does this very specific job and compresses in a certain way that for certain types of instruments or certain circumstances that I'll use it on. And that's another whole topic with plugins, certain circumstances or certain tracks or certain instruments. Do you know what the difference of those are? I mean, if you've got this EQ that you use for flutes, why you use it for flutes, and you'll be talking to some guy for the next 2 weeks trying to figure out why has he used that compressor for those flutes, and what exactly is that algorithm doing. Be careful of that, because you can get lost in that, and if you really understand exactly what that compressor is doing or why it's doing that, it can be helpful, but you can also get lost in it. You got 45 different compressors for, I mean, you just, that can sometimes get ridiculous. So be real careful of that. But basically, you will find that you've got go-to plugins that, go-to compressors. You might have a couple different compressors, a couple different gates or expanders or reverbs that you really like that do, certain things. And then the only other thing you're really going to be dealing with is, uniqueness. If you've got this track and this vocal and you want this reverb to sound unique, something just cool and new. And that goes for any other type of effect or plug-in also, that you've got this new reverb that you got that does this cool thing, and it's like, wow, it just makes it's got this different sound that's just really cool, and I wanted some real uniqueness in that track and on this, production for that specific application. But be real careful of that you just don't load up on a bunch of plugins that you're never going to use, that all your other stock plugins or that cheap free plugins do anyway. But don't turn your eye on invention either. You'll get when a new plugin comes out and it sounds like it's doing something new and cool, investigate it. But don't buy it. Get the trial version after you've read about it. Understand exactly what the plugin's doing. Try to look at it as, what things does that plugin do that my other plugins do? And what does that plugin do that there's no way any of my other plugins can do? And then, how could my plugins do what that's doing? What can I do in my studio to make that happen with what I have before I buy that new plugin? By the time you get done going through that process and downloading the trial and using it in an application that it's used for, or that you might use it for in your productions, that you have a pretty good understanding of whether you need that plugin or if it's going to be something you will really use and not just a waste of your money and taking up space in your computer for no reason. And also understand that you'll hear people, they buy new plugins all the time, and if you're not the type of person who can afford a plugin, stick with the basics, the basic processors, and if you've got the professional grade version of your DAW, the processors are probably pretty good anyway. And there are tons of free plugins out there to check out. And I suggest you do check them out, and you can mess around a little bit to better understand what the concepts are. But really understand, what the concept is of that plugin. I got a spatial enhancer. What the hell is that? I've got a spatial enhancer, well, what does that mean? What exactly is it doing to the audio? As far as audio engineering is concerned, what exactly is it doing? Exactly. Now, it kind of does this. What exactly is it doing? Throw it on a track and figure out exactly what it's doing. Read about it to find out exactly what that processor is doing so you have a complete comprehensive understanding of what it's doing. And it's just not some new plugin that, glows green on the outside edges, but I don't know, it does this thing. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, a very specific applications for what you want to do. And then there's also times where you just want to play. I've got these plugins that I've bought, I can afford it, and I just like playing with them. I don't care, I really don't care about this new synth or this new plugin, and I don't give a rat ass, dude. I'm having fun. It's a blast. I'm messing around and making all these weird ass noises. And you might stumble upon something that's like, whoa, that is so cool, and it ends up on your album or on somebody else's album. That can happen. So, that is a whole nother thing that, kind of throws all that other stuff out of the water, but it's true. It can be. So, that is a very real thing, and so don't disregard that also. And so I hope that kind of opened that up, but, the best plugins are the best ones that get the job done for you. And all the aspects that I've talked about here, relate those plugins to the aspects that I'm speaking about here, and if they fit in those categories, and if they're useful to you in those categories. And then find the ones that are useful to you to get the job done, that are just fun, that you're having fun or you're investigating, or whatever other categories those plugins might fall into, but that it's useful to you. Peace, hope, love.